I'm going to suggest that acceptance testing is largely reactive, that it tends to come at the end of the development process. It's frequently based on whatever has been written. That it's largely unplanned, unanticipating. Unfortunately, acceptance testing very often turns into a lot of work and often very little payback because it doesn't find many of the errors. It's fairly common that people get into a very adversarial relationship with arguments between users and developers. Okay? And one of the biggest frustrations is that when errors are found in user acceptance testing, it's too late to fix them. And so people really say, well, why did we go through all this effort to find these things that aren't going to get fixed? Now, out of all of this, it's my experience that users tend to lack competence in user acceptance testing, which leads to lacking confidence in user acceptance testing, which in turn leads to lacking commitment to participating in the user acceptance testing. Next slide. Make sure we're still here. And so why do the users lack confidence? Well, it's real common that the users don't know how to test. That's not their job. They're doing whatever they really do. And unfortunately, the developers who often hand them the software to do user acceptance testing on don't really have much of an idea about testing either. One of the most common scenarios is that the developers hand the software over to the users and say, go play with it, go try it out. Well, consider these terms. Play with it. What do we play with? We play with toys. And this software is not a toy. Go try it out? Well, try it out swell. How do I try it out? Don't know how to try it out. Don't have any idea. And so sometimes what happens is that the developers then say, well, here, let me just take you through it. Push this button. Push that button. Okay? And the users dutifully push the buttons, screens change or what have you, but they don't really have much of an idea of why it is that they're doing this. And there's always this nagging attitude that isn't it the developer's job to make the software and make it work right? And if they do encounter an error, the users don't see that as a normal part of the development process. They think they've broken it, and that can make them very apprehensive about touching it further. And just in general, the developer view tends to dominate. Now, I'm going to describe some proactive testing techniques that I think provide a basis for more confidence and competence and increased user participation. And so, next slide. So, the objectives that I see for today. First of all is to identify some of the reasons that users often are reluctant to participate in UAT. Secondly, to distinguish conventional testing's approaches, which are often ineffective, and distinguish them from some more successful proactive user acceptance testing approaches. I think you'll see why they're more effective. And thirdly, to describe the relative roles of professional testers and or business analysts, because sometimes business analysts are the ones in this position, okay, in helping the users define proactive user acceptance criteria. And doing that can help create the competence and confidence and commitment. So, next slide. Okay. So, we've got familiar V model. Some of you may be familiar with this. The V model is the first model of software development that actually gave much attention or visibility to testing. And we start up in the left-hand corner with business user requirements. And this is the sequence in which systems get built. They start with the business or user requirements. They develop a high-level design to satisfy those requirements. They drive that high-level design down to a low-level design, which then is coded. Okay? And so the development is on the left-hand side, and then we start working up the right-hand side. And we do unit tests, which are code-based tests, primarily by the developer. And then integration tests, which are testing combinations of units and other integrations. And those are largely testing low-level design, primarily interfaces. And then the largest integrations are the system tests, the end-to-end running the system in a production-like environment. And those are largely testing high-level design, major features. Now, unit testing, integration testing, and system testing are what I call technical or development testing. They are the responsibility of the development side of the house. And development includes analysts, business analysts, QA and testing, as well as programmers. When the development folks think that the system is ready, then it goes to the users for user acceptance testing, which is primarily demonstrating that the developed systems, in fact, are what the business needs. That's the basic flow. Now, next slide. So I've found a number of reasons that users tend to resist. First of all, what we mentioned, the lack of confidence in what to test and how to test, because that's not really their job. That's not their primary emphasis. Okay? In addition, very often users, when doing user acceptance testing, are testing the wrong things. They're testing against the system design, not against the business requirements. They're simply testing that the system is what was designed, the system is built as what was designed. Okay? Just like everybody else, the users are having insufficient time and resources, okay? And to some extent, the number of resources that they need may signal that the software is not in good enough condition when it gets to them anyhow. The attitude, as I mentioned a moment ago, that the user's job is to do whatever they do, do the business, not to test software. And so not only is this not my job, but it's something that is typically imposed on top of my full-time job. And that really becomes a basis for resistance. And then, after all this effort, it's common that the user acceptance tests don't find much. And when things show up later, the users get blamed for not having found them. Sometimes they get blamed for what they find. Okay? And sometimes, and possibly with good reason, the users believe that their feedback will not be paid attention to. And heaven forbid, I know it's hard to imagine, but many developers take a kind of an intimidating approach here and really demean the users and treat them very poorly, treat them without a whole lot of respect. And the users, when you're treated poorly, sometimes you believe that you deserve it. So, next slide. The situation tends not to get improved by the traditional mainstream professional testing community. If you are familiar